Cover 3 Tailgate. And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Smash that like. I see you, Justin. Come and hang out in the Cover 3 tailgate where Justin says, y'all better hit the like for this episode. The boys are working on a holiday. Happy Labor Day. And we pause to remember all who labor on this day, on this very emotional day. Thank you to all of your service, those who labor. So it is a Monday. We have week 1 behind us. Upon further review, gives us a chance to, further expand on what Teteroa McMillan did on Saturday night after the show, because good gravy, he was lighting it up even as our lengthy instant reaction show was coming to a close. Some more observations as always. I love upon further review, we can dive deep on stuff, hit stuff we didn't get in that instant reaction show. 11:30 p.m. Eastern time comes quick on a Saturday. We try to give you, everything that's raw. You get a little time to marinate on it. But unlike most weeks, we begin with a look back at Sunday night football college style, because in Las Vegas, that is where USC began its Big Ten era with a 27-20 win against LSU. A lot of different ways to pick this apart, but I'll let you get first word. What'd you think about this lock fight loss?
I want to talk more about USC, right? Like USC came out for 2 years. They had looked like a joke on defense. We've talked about it. Like, what do these guys do in practice? Do they hit? Do they tackle? Like the assignments they miss are egregious. USC was competent. They had that defense installed. Like, credit to D'Anton Lynn. I think he did a great job for them. They did not allow any sort of blown coverage and freebies over at the top. Most of the passes they allowed were in like the short to intermediate range. And when they did, they tackled really well. I thought they played pretty good anticipatory defense as well. Whereas, like, look, we know we're going to allow the ball underneath, but they were moving on them, pretty quickly. And I thought Nussmeier played really well, but USC effectively played what we like to call in this show red zone roulette. Like, that was good. We're going to allow you to drive down the field somewhat, and then we hope that we will force more field goals than touchdowns in the red zone. And they actually got one red zone stop, just an outright stop.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. Like, that was much better. They also, in the first half, I thought did a pretty good job of confusing some of LSU's run game stuff, where USC would get movement LSU would get movement when they knew the right person to block. But oftentimes, like, you saw guys kind of doubling when I don't think there's supposed to be a double there, and allowed somebody else to come over the top, which is free. So nice job. USC appears to figure out how to practice and be a little more physical. That's what we've been asking for. Everybody gave me a bunch of crap for putting Lincoln Riley down in my coaching rankings, but personally, I didn't think I had any other choice based on how they were regressing every year. I think he's got it right. Next year, if this continues, he's going way back up, because the offense was great. 10.5 yards per attempt for Miller Moss. We roasted LSU's ass all offseason for not using the transfer portal to fix that defense. Got a trivia question for you guys.
Ooh.
How many quarterbacks last year against Power 5 teams threw for more than 10.5 yards per attempt?
I already know the answer, so I'll let Chip and Danny go. You guys don't know?
No.
It was Jaden Daniels who played for LSU.
That's the only one who did it?
Congrats, LSU. You allowed a Heisman-worthy performance in terms of yards per attempt. Now, you played some red zone roulette too, but 10.5 yards per attempt allowed is egregious. Miller Moss played well. These LSU DBs, they're bad, man. And to me, I think Nussmeier's awesome. I think the O-line's awesome. I think they wasted an opportunity. So,
I mean, I was very pleased with the USC defense. They gave up a lot of yards, but like you're saying, it was by design, and it was nice to see USC actually have a defensive design. And what was ballsy about it was not only was the red zone roulette, but to play red zone roulette, like you said, you've got to be able to tackle, because that's the only way you're going to keep people from making big plays against you if you're trying to keep everything in front. And they actually tackled. So I was very, very enthusiastic and pleasantly surprised what I saw from that USC defense. Obviously, outside of locking up the over in the game where the red zone roulette kind of killed me. But I think it's an encouraging start. Miller Moss looked really good. Like, maybe Lincoln Riley does know what he's doing with quarterbacks. And like Bud said, maybe he needs to be up a little higher than 30th in the 65 Power 5 coach rankings. But
I deserve that for sure. Like,
maybe Brian Kelly needs to go down a little further. It's weird. I think if I'm LSU, I don't think last night was terrible for LSU. I think you were in a good game against a good team and you just came up short in the end. I don't think like it's going to be a disastrous season. I do find it funny that they've won 5 straight home openers. If I am Brian Kelly, I am going to my athletic director and saying, who do they play next week year in the season opener? It's Clemson. Yeah, like, we need to cancel that game, and we need to schedule Alabama A&M, somebody that we could just beat 63-0 to make everybody feel happy for a week.
I agree with everything you guys said. I feel better about both teams. Like, clearly you're going to feel good about USC. I didn't know what we're going to get from LSU. Like, I've heard a lot about stuff about Garrett Nussmeier, and the Garrett Nussmeier show was on display in the first half. And it was like this coronation of, here's one Heisman to the next, and here's your next great quarterback. And yet Miller Moss was going toe to toe. And I thought on the night overall, I thought Miller Moss was the better quarterback. I thought he was under more duress, more pressure situations, made even tighter throws. They were both awesome, but I thought Miller Moss outplayed him at the end. I think the one thing that I looked at, because we've talked about this a lot, and I remember having this conversation being like, well, they can bring in all these coaches. They can bring in Danton Lynn. They can bring in Matt Entz. They can bring in, a new defensive mind, but it's not the players that they've changed. And maybe I undersold, and they covered it in the game last night, but I had read it before about them adding 1,400 pounds of bulk, this offseason, and the training and conditioning. I think there's something to that. They looked physical. They looked like they could go toe to toe. I don't know what drills they did to improve tackling, but they wrapped up and tackled guys in the open field, like one-on-one tackles. There were a couple that looked like touchdown saving tackles that were really solid. I thought both teams played really well. I thought it was the game of the weekend. And that's what my overall lasting impression was like. I feel better about both teams. Because I feel like a lot of the questions were answered. And I know it doesn't make LSU fans feel any better, but you got what you wanted out of Garrett Nussmeier. You saw an improved defense, which I think is clearly much better. I think there's some criticism clearly of the way Brian Kelly handled the late game situations. There's some other things, but I think overall I feel better about both teams because I wasn't a big believer that either one were really a contender. And I definitely think USC is a contender in the Big Ten, especially from what we saw out of Oregon and Michigan. And LSU, I would say I was very iffy on them. I think they could go toe-to-toe with anybody, probably outside of Georgia, that I feel like, and maybe even Georgia, they could go toe-to-toe with. So I feel better about both teams. That was kind of my takeaway.
I do think it's important to point out, how hard USC played. Like, those kids are bought into what that staff is doing. I thought that was evident on the field. They did do a nice job in the portal with the DBs. They took 2 kids from UCLA. They took 1 kid from Florida State. Like, those guys, they're not amazing, but they are definitely better than what USC did last year. And some of the stuff USC used to run just didn't make any sense structurally. And okay, if you have Ed Reed, great. Like that, I recommend doing stuff like that. But if you don't, just run like a reasonably competent defense and tackle and play hard. And their fundamentals just look so much better. So for them to pull that off in one offseason, I'm stunned, but I'm super impressed. Like, that is great.
I know of another defense that seems to think they have Ed Reed at safety. But anyways, back to this game. Like, I will say, USC, there's going to be a lot of hype about, clearly a big win to start the season over LSU. You're going to hype it up. Expectations are raised. We were all very impressed by Miller Moss. The one aspect of the game that concerns me going forward with Miller Moss, we have seen Lincoln in the past, whether it was Baker, Jalen, Kyler, Caleb, guys who are big but not overly tall. They did a really good job of moving them out of the pocket when things weren't there. Miller Moss had a lot of passes batted down last night. And to me, that could be a problem going forward because, like, he's not a statue, but he's not nearly as mobile in my estimation as those other guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they start figuring out ways to get him moving out of the pocket to get him, open up some passing lanes, because that could be a problem going into the conference play.
I
And
think
a lot of
better
those
defenses than LSU for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of those batted passes almost got picked. Like it was, there were a few. I mean, I don't know what the count was, but it felt like there were 5. There might only been 3, but they were definitely getting after that. And you're right, Tom. If defenses start to notice that, I would rather get crushed after I threw the ball and got it out than have a tipped ball, like batted ball. That used to piss me off so bad. And at some point, defenses will start just sitting there trying to bat it down. They'll really take a concerted effort in doing that. So that is definitely something they need to be aware of.
So Brian Kelly made himself a little highlight in the post-game press conference. And before we get that rolling, what I like when those moments happen is to go back to the beginning of the press conference, because coaches don't often jump right into that. They normally lather themselves up, and then there's the moment that ends up getting clipped and put on TVs all over the place. And so I went back to the very beginning, and the thing that Brian Kelly would not stop saying is we got inside the 15-yard line 3 times and came away with 6 points, and that was unacceptable. And then this is, quote, "We put way too much on our defense to be something they aren't ready to be. They battled, but we have warts, and they're not getting better overnight." He pointed to the fact that the 2 personal fouls that led to USC scores came from veterans, came from players that Brian Kelly and this staff count on to be team leaders. Brian Kelly seems to act like this was the worst possible result, given the way that a lot of other things had gone if they didn't have 10 penalties and a couple of them being incredibly damaging. Now, that said, hey, let's hear from Brian Kelly.
Coach, is it disappointing when you have, Savion Jones kind of really rose up, Aaron Anderson, John Emery, they kind of put you in position? Is it disappointing when those guys perform and you don't get a victory?
Hell yes. Hell yes. I mean, and that's what I said to the team. I said, we had some guys played their butts off tonight, and we're sitting here again. We're sitting here again talking about the same things, about not finishing when you have an opponent in a position to put them away. But what we're doing on the sideline is feeling like the game's over. And I'm so angry about it that I got to do something about it. I'm not doing a good enough job as a coach. And I got to coach them better, because it's unacceptable for us not to have found a way to win this football game. It's ridiculous. And it's crazy.
Listen, Brian Kelly got a lot of heat for that, but I will say at least he was able to open that bottle of water.
Yes.
Why did Brian Kelly really get heat for that?
Yeah. I mean, he's Brian Kelly. He's going to get made. He's a meme. He's a walking meme on college football Twitter, period.
Fair.
You guys totally felt that was like prepped in advance, right? Like I felt yes, like I'm gonna go in there and at some point I'm gonna slam my fist on the table and I'm gonna send a message to my players. I think he wanted it to feel spontaneous, like I'm just getting really upset right now, but it felt way like staged.
I'm telling you, as watching 745 until he got to that point, he just kept repeating the same things he was frustrated about, and the reporters kept asking the same questions. He gave the same answer for the things that he thought was wrong. He said, you have to be a steely-eyed killer in this sport, and we're not that. I mean, he's criticizing whether the dog is in them. Like he probably
more authentic.
I don't think it was authentic, because I would never claim Brian Kelly as like the center of authenticity. But I am saying that from watching the entire press conference as a whole, it is very clear that he believes that this team played well enough and a lot of the players played well enough that they should have gotten a different result. And it was all the intangible stuff. It was all the stuff between the ears. It wasn't X's and O's. He felt like the defense was more connected. He felt like they did a good enough job, given the personnel that they have, to be able to win the football game. And dumbassery is the thing that has him sitting with a 5th straight loss in a season opener.
I think what Brian Kelly really needed was a friend in that press conference to ask him what he thought about his team's execution, so he could get that joke off and just, lighten the mood.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like Link, and I get the record of openers. Don't you think Lincoln Riley needed that game way more than Brian Kelly? Just
Yes.
because of all the stuff about him wanting to get out of the game. He didn't want to go in the SEC, and then he was upset about the Big Ten. Now, criticism that he's taken, I feel like he needed that game more, and he got it.
To steal a bit from another podcast, I will say for Lincoln Riley, that was a must win, but for Brian Kelly, it was a can't lose.
I like that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I agree with Danny on that. I also wonder if Brian Kelly is mad at himself.
Yeah, probably.
Like, I don't know that I'm ready to say that Joe Sloan is a major downgrade from Mike Denbrock as a play caller. It's his first game as a play caller on this type of stage. But I also don't know that he's not a downgrade. But how much is Kelly involved in this offense with a guy who was previously just a really good quarterback coach, and now he is the OC? I thought USC did a great job of baiting LSU into running the ball in the fourth quarter, especially on first down. USC sold out like crazy to stop the run. Do you know that LSU had a 0% success rate rushing the football on first down in the fourth quarter? They were putting themselves behind, like, throw the ball. Nussmeier is going to be a high draft pick. You need to lean on that kid. USC's not covering you all that well. Like, maybe they're not giving up the explosives, but I thought they're just being that hard-headed. Like, you guys are not running the ball that well today. Like, for whatever reason, whether it's confusion or whatever, but also operationally. Both teams struggle with some of the substitutions. I think Riley in the fourth quarter, like, they had to take 2 timeouts because they were still running personnel on and trying to change stuff. But LSU consistently was just not smooth looking out of the huddle. And so I wonder how much that'll improve over the course of the season. But they got to throw the ball. Like, you got a lot of good receivers on that team. You got a really good quarterback. Their passing success rate is way higher. And just the sticking to the run killed them.
I will say, like, I think last night we did see evidence. Like, last year, I don't think LSU's run game was that good last year either. I think the run game was just Jaden Daniels for the most part, like running and picking up huge chunk yardage. I don't think when they were actually just dropping, handing off and going, they were all that spectacular. But I do think last night we saw the impact, especially in the red zone, of not having Jaden Daniels, who can really use his legs, as a threat and cause defenses to be able to defend you differently. And then outside of the red zone, like, I like Kyron Lacey a lot. I was talking about him last spring when I was watching the Jaden Daniels tape, and I just fell in love with him. But there's no Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas on that team. Their receivers might be good, but it's a lot different when you don't have those two roaming wide open against every secondary that they face because they're so damn fast. So
the speed threat with Hilton, I think they missed. Like, he didn't play. That could be what they needed somebody to take the top off a little bit better. But also, you could take the top off by running some play action. Like how much cover 4 are you getting there? How many posts did LSU try? Like, did they try any deep overs? I mean, at some point, with
USC was just dropping everything back. It just wasn't there. Yeah.
Like, when I watched it, I was like, okay, at some point, USC is going to bluff a smoke screen and go up. And they did. And they threw it to the H-back, which was kind of cool. But LSU was jumping some of these little screens so fast. And they did. And they hit like a 25-yarder off it. LSU never threw that deep. Like, they never really tried that hard play action for the deep stuff.
I do think, though, and Tom was pointed out, and I thought Herbstreit was pointed out during the game, I think they were playing that 4 umbrella coverage, keep them all in front of you because this is a big play, explosive offense that thrives off that. Let's give them the short underneath stuff. And they were like nervous. I mean, that's why it was so wide open. Those little quick outs and the 10-yard, hitches and stuff like that was wide open. I think that was very much a plan. And it was that whole bend, don't break. And then when the throws get tighter, we step up, and they did.
I just okay. In the fourth, you ran the ball decently in the third quarter. And just every first down that was 1st and 10 in the fourth, just run. Like, I don't know, try a kill shot, but that's like Monday morning quarterbacking, obviously.
It literally is.
It was a Sunday, we usually it's Sunday morning.
Yeah, the Kyron Lacey is an alien. He's awesome, but
he's a character. That is 1,000% for sure.
I did think.
How about the aliens for USC though? I mean, Zachariah Branch when he's running the catch of the year from Hudson. There was some play. Like, that's the thing too. Like, they had some playmakers. That's why I do think I'm all of a sudden. I talked to Petros Papadakis in LA. He does LA radio. Petros, he's a great dude.
He's phenomenal.
we were previewing this game, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to get out of either one of these teams. And we were talking USC specific, and I said, I could go down. I think, Chip, you've said this before too. I could go down and talk myself into wins on a lot of games, but a lot of it hinges on how do they look. But one of the things was if they beat LSU, all of a sudden that game against Michigan feels like gettable. And then after what we saw out of Michigan, it's like, okay, that feels like they could actually win that thing. And then you start going down. It's like that Penn State game at home. I know Penn State was more explosive, but USC's defense looked a lot better. Like all of a sudden, I know we have to be careful because we don't want to get out ahead of ourselves.
Oh, let's get ahead of ourselves. I hear 10-2.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dan Cahill is USC winning the Big Ten.
All right. Here's one
me
for
and
you.
Colin Cowherd. But what you don't, like, I do think legitimately, I feel like, because it was the 4 teams and then the gap. I think USC is in the 5 teams and then the gap.
I agree. Is the Big Ten's best 5 better than the SEC's best 5?
I mean, I
Who's
tweeted
really
it.
to tell, but because
tweeted it this morning.
Michigan did not look good. So, like, are they, I think it's
There's still
close,
such
though.
a high floor for Michigan because who can block them?
Right.
Like
Fresno
Texas
State.
may be able to.
In the last, as currently constructed, in the last 3 games between the Big Ten and the SEC that mattered, not like bowl games, but the playoff and the regular season, USC's beaten LSU, Michigan's beaten Alabama, and Washington beat Texas. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you say like the top 9, the SEC is clearly deeper there
For sure.
But the top 5, I don't know. We'll see.
George, so
I'd still lean SEC.
do you include LSU in the top 5?
No, not after how their DBs played.
Okay.
That's way too many busts.
Well, who are we considering then? Georgia, Alabama,
Texas.
Tennessee, Texas,
Ole Miss.
and Ole Miss.
I think it's SEC, but it is closer than we thought it was a week ago.
Yes. That's
Well,
a
we'll
good
find out. We'll find
it's
out
also-
with Texas, Michigan, how one of these stacks up.
It's also tough to really do at this point because, like, yeah, Georgia smoked Clemson, but the rest of those teams all played FCS competition for the most part, whereas those the top 5 in the Big Ten were at least playing FBS opponents.
Yeah. One last thing before we hit a break and start to open this up just a little bit. We're gonna highlight some of the best individual performances from our fantasy league. You might remember the fantasy draft before the season, but I'm just going to say to all of the quarterbacks out there across the country, all of the coaching staffs out there across the country, Hudson Card came on the Cover 3 podcast 24 for 25. Miller Moss came on the Cover 3 podcast, just threw for more 300 yards and beat LSU in the season opener. If you want your quarterback, or if you are a quarterback and you want to have a stellar performance in a big moment, come on the Cover 3 podcast.
Did you
Nice
mention
job
Dylan
not
Gabriel?
mentioning Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. Well, that team didn't play great, but I mean, he was Bo Nix 2.0. I mean, he was just right there, just distributing. What was he? 41 of 40.
I have some things to share on that upon further review.
Okay. Coming up on the other side, some of the biggest individual performances that mattered to us, and much, much more as we go under the hood for upon further review. All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. But do you want to be you are the league manager. You want to give the write up? You want to give the report of what happened in
so
Cover 3 Fantasy League over the weekend? I mean, I
continuing the curse.
I can tell you, but
I mean, Danny had a 180-point lead on Chip entering the weekend. And dude, we're gonna have to get the beard back. This is continue. Like I do think it's like, has Danny cursed FSU, his own fantasy team, locks? I'm a little worried about like the shaving the beard curse. This is continuing. And Chip stormed all the way back, unless somehow, well, I guess there's some chance that Toafili or who do you got? Rodell and Malik Benson tonight.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna need a very, very big night from those two for Danny to come back here, and maybe he can. I don't know, but Chip throwing up a cool 300 points. Chip, who carried you to this?
Yeah, all right. So here's what has
we kind of want to use this segment to talk about like standout players that we maybe don't hit every week in team and coach discussion.
Yeah, what has paid off big time was the commitment to stacks. Okay, like when you decide that Jackson Dart and Trey Harris are going to be a formidable duo, then Dart goes out there, throws for 418 and 5 touchdowns, while Trey Harris pulls in 179 of those yards on 8 catches with 2 touchdowns. Also being able to get in on some of that Dylan Gabriel love with Tez Johnson paid off. Ollie Gordon was my 1-1 pick. Feels like that's just going to be a steady dose basically every single game that he's out there. Ollie Gordon finishing, with 1 receiving touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns, 104 rushing yards. So 3 total touchdowns and $142 of total offense. I'm excited about the future though. I got my Deion Burks out there, but I got Cam Coleman. What we saw from Cam Coleman in week 1 for Auburn and those freshman wide receivers was pretty good. Also on the freshman wide receiver front, Ryan Williams, the freshman from Alabama, in a big start for Alabama's offense. Good gravy. Ryan Williams feels like something special. So those would be the MVPs from Team Inner Sandman.
I am so angry right now that I lost this matchup after this. If you know who I'm most angry at? Shedeur Sanders, because if he wants to check out of that play late, at least hit it for the touchdown, add my point total, and preferably hit one of my receivers that I got there, whether it was Will Shepard or LeJontay Wester. Like, come on, let's go. Probably the biggest mistakes in mine, how I didn't come up. Julian Fleming, where art thou? Like, I thought he was supposed to be the guy that was going to all this in, and I didn't know they had Wallace there that was going to step up and be that one. But Julian Fleming, did he get a target? We kept looking at that throughout the game.
I don't think he got a target.
Where is he? Like, what's happening? He was nowhere to be found. That was probably the most disappointing for me because I thought I was rolling with Brant Keithy and Cam Rising, that combo.
Well, yeah,
RJ was phenomenal.
Casey Concepcion got you started on Thursday.
Yeah, I had a lot of the early action that had me the early lead. I don't love that. I already hate this league. It sucks.
Chip, you mentioned having the Jackson Dart, Trey Harris stack. Imagine having a Noah Fafita, Teteroa McMillan stack, because those two, you morons, after I took Tet McMillan in the draft, you guys just let Noah Fafita sit there until late, where I just snapped him up and said, okay, I'll take that stack a couple weeks. They combined for 103.5 points against New Mexico on Saturday night while we were doing the show. Tet McMillan, 10 catches, 304 yards, 4 touchdown catches. And then Noah had, 422 yards.
Yeah.
His 4 touchdowns, all to Tet. And then he also ran for 10. So, yeah.
You also got in on the Jackson Arnold, like those.
My team is stacked, bro. I'm not going to lose.
Some of these point explosions against like FCS teams or lesser teams was just some fortunate scheduling there for sure.
Woody Marks running up the score just by half a point for me last night. I appreciate that dedication. Just got to give an extra half point.
Did you want him to go down or do you want him to score?
Oh, I wanted him to score. He's on my fantasy team.
Well, I mean,
I don't care about game situations. The game situation for me is I want points.
That was painful to watch. Like I was pretty sure you were going to catch me, and then that's like, okay, so McMillan's going to go for 300 yards. Thanks, appreciate that. I mean, I thought John Mateer going up 59, like 352 through the air, 5 touchdowns. He ran for 55 and also scored. So it's like State.
Hey, that's the Washington State quarterback for those at home who don't have John Mateer on the top of mind. I'm not talking smack about the CW All-Stars. I just feel like we need some context given the way that Oregon State, the Pac-2, Oregon State, Washington State are going to live their college football lives. Sometimes we gotta remind you and celebrate what those teams are doing.
Jalen Milroe.
Yeah,
like that. 200 passing, 79 rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. I mean, I'm expecting that every week. I think they're going to be mashing the rush button with Jalen Milroe a lot. I think Jalen Milroe could rush for 1,000. Like I think they're going to have to really hit that button quite a bit this year. Running back, Dylan Sampson, of course, for Tennessee, killed it for me. Receivers, though, we're going to have a little team meeting because Iron Manor for Stanford, okay. Chris Bell did nothing. Bernard for Bama did nothing. Burden, Missouri was scoring so fast on like defensive special teams, these short fields. They pulled him pretty quick. Higgins and Hudson did, love it, not much. Jordan Moore for Duke got like a bunch of targets and just couldn't score. Oklahoma State's got some nice receivers though. Like Owens and Presley that's a nice combo. I think an underrated combo. And so yeah, my team sucked this week and I lost to Tom, but Mateer, very good. And Milroe, I'm glad I picked him first round.
Speaking of disappointments at the wide receiver position, I know Danny, you had Julian. Where was Nick Harbor against Old Dominion? Did I miss something there?
I don't think he's very good. Like he doesn't start on an offense that looks terrible. So that probably says something about how good he is.
Come on.
Like, I think he's big and fast, but I don't know if he's good as. I don't think he's like good at football.
No, it was a
Olympics.
late round flyer.
Yeah, that right.
I had Olympic fever.
Yeah.
It's a late round flyer on Nick Harbor.
Also, somebody said that South Carolina's new quarterback is playing like Joe Milton with rec specs, and that is actually pretty accurate as to what he looked like on Saturday.
Once again, our thanks to Fantrax, a little bit of I guess free advertising here. They have college fantasy, and the reason that we are excited about it is because they do allow you to have best ball, which means we don't have to manage rosters. We went through our entire draft. You can go listen to the episode, and then it automatically picks the highest possible combination based on the roster. We will continue to use this as a vehicle to highlight some of our favorite individual performances. But you also stacked Washington State by throwing Kyle Williams on the other side too, and he ended up stepping up. So this Washington State stack might be the sleeper of a Power 5 asterisk only draft that we've got right here.
Oh, do they play New Mexico? Because if so, they're going to make that Tet McMillan Fafita game look pretty similar because they'll throw it.
Can I just remind you guys that I tried to draft Travis Hunter and he wasn't available as a receiver? That would be my one complaint with the site.
I know you had him on that sleeper list. The other three of us certainly would have never considered taking Travis Hunter.
Oh, man. Coming up on the other side, every single Monday, it's a chance to go deeper on some of the reactions from the weekend, to hit some of those things we didn't get a chance to talk about on Saturday's show, and so much more, including that late night action we'll get into upon further review next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Yes, if you just joined us, we had a comment on Sunday. Said, wow, you guys do reaction shows on Saturday? Yeah. Where you been? But also, come on, welcome aboard. On Mondays, we will. Market's closed today. It's Labor Day. Market's closed today, but we'll be getting day trading Danny in other episodes, stock up, stock down from our own Danny Cannell. Take a look at the new college football rankings with Poll Assassin and more. Yes, Danny?
Well, I was just going to say, was it an hour 41, the recap?
So long.
Because I go for a run Sunday morning and I go like 5 miles, and it's usually about time for a good, Cover 3 recap pod. I had to go 1.5 to make sure I got it in.
I mean,
I'm like, you guys sound like you're talking super slow to me today. So I'm used to the 1.5 voice.
Well, I mean, there are some instant reaction shows where you probably need to speed it up to make it normal, But I remember that we had hit like a minute 5 or an hour 5, and I realized that I still had 12 games we wanted to talk about. So, this is why we have upon further review. There were terrible calls. Do we want to go ahead and jump in?
After further review.
All right, Tom, where would you like to have us start?
I'm going to start with the Oregon game. Went back and rewatched a little bit of it. Like, we talked about it a bit on Saturday. Like, they were missing guys on their offensive line, and that was very evident. But, like, I looked just watching the game, there were a few shots down the field, but do you know what Dylan Gabriel's average air yards per attempt were in that game? 4.2. Like, my primary concern was that in a game in which Oregon really didn't look like they were trying to do a whole hell of a lot, put it on tape. Like, yeah, the offensive line was not at top level, but he took 3 sacks against Idaho. Bo Nix was sacked 6 times all of last year. And Dylan Gabriel, for his size, I don't want him taking sacks because we know he's not the biggest guy. We know he's had an injury history. So that is something of a concern for me going through the season. But based on what I saw in that game, I'm not overly concerned about Oregon going forward. That just felt like they were approaching that like a scrimmage, and it stuck. They let the other team hang around a little too long. So upon rewatch, the alarm bells aren't all that great. And then just another fun stat here before I let you guys get to some stuff, because I also
I want to stay here with
Okay.
Oregon for a minute too.
Go.
Okay. The reason why it was so alarming is because of what had happened in the FCS game in each of the first 2 years under Dan Lanning, that they put up like 70 and 81, and so that's why you've got the sticker shock, as I like to say, when you're like looking through the scores to get into it. You start to see that they were able to move the ball a lot. They just struggled a little bit in terms of actually getting points there. But I think it's fair to consider that Oregon is a little bit more of a work in progress, because that's one thing that stood out to me in terms of reviewing everything together, is that there were teams where it looked like they had been playing college football for 2 to 3 weeks, and there were teams where it looked like you were still in week 2 of fall camp. And that happens every single season, but it does look like Oregon. I believe Oregon will get much better as the season goes on. I think that's, you have to like slide your scale. Like, okay, they are not to top speed yet. They are working there. Other teams, a Penn State, a Georgia, they look like they are 2 to 3 weeks into the season. And so, it'll all even out by the time we get middle October, late October. You sort of will be who you are based on your talent and availability. But Oregon is not quite humming there. The good news for the Ducks is, when do they actually need to have that motor going full speed?
It's context dependent. If Oregon's schedule was not so backloaded, you would feel differently, I think. We talked about this on the reaction show. Do I think Oregon has a better ceiling than Penn State? I do. If they lined up and played today, given who we think is out for Oregon, I would take Penn State to beat them, right? Because they're playing a guy who I'm pretty sure is a walk-on at center.
I saw that note.
And he plays like a walk-on. So if they played a real D-line right now, they would get eaten up, I think. Also, I think Dylan Gabriel has a worse arm than Bo Nix, right? He's good at throwing that rainbow ball down the field and to let guys.
And only to his left. Only to his left. Don't ask him to throw right.
There is a bit of a tendency there. And he's pretty accurate on the underneath stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think this will still be a really good offense. You're also kind of waiting for a bigger body guy to emerge. Oregon wants that to be Jerion Dickey, I believe, at receiver, because Tez and Evan Stewart are not really big guys. And so I'm kind of curious, do they have a bigger, body guy? They went out in the portal and they got Evan Stewart, who I think is a great get for them, obviously. But there was just not a plentiful amount of the bigger bodied receivers in the portal this year. Georgia got the only one that I really like, actually, in Colby Young. So they may just be kind of speed, but they need that power run game to come back a little better, which if they get the O-lineman back, I think they possibly will. If they don't, then they won't. Defense, though, pretty okay.
Yeah.
20 carries, 49 for Idaho is pretty solid. And I watched that Boise game against Georgia Southern. They put up insane numbers. Madsen also threw 3 of the most WTF throws I saw all weekend. I'm not talking about bad throws, but I'm talking about clearly bad decisions into double coverage. Murphy for Duke also had one. I was like, oh my God. But clean pocket, just what are you doing, dude? So if they have to lean on him more, I'm curious as if they can. If Oregon can shut down Ginty this weekend.
Georgia Southern also, let's see, their next game is fascinating. Where is it?
It is. It's really.
What is it?
It's at Nevada.
That's it.
Or Nevada. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I was like,
it's actually pronounced Nevada.
Because Nevada went and did the thing against Troy. And so now we're the year of the wolf has bled over to the Wolfpack 2 words. And now all of a sudden with that Nevada going up against Georgia Southern, who just played with fireworks and got their fingers blown off against Boise State. I mean, it's some interesting week 2 matchups below the radar.
If we did a ranking of which team improved its coaching the most year over year, everybody's fighting for second because Nevada is number 1 clearly. Like that, the coaching both on the offense, defense, and overall team organization and structure is wildly better. I'd be curious who you guys think is second. Like maybe Bronco at New Mexico, but I mean, they look so different.
Yeah, I would need some time on that. All right, Bud, where would you like to go?
I want to go to Auburn. Everybody's going to talk about the offense, and that's cool, but they need some impact defensive linemen. And 24/7 Sports was the only site out there to rank Amaris Williams as a 5-star. That's a kid who was committed to Florida for a lot of the process out of North Carolina. Kind of reminds me of like a Marcel Darius type player. He flashed, man. That guy's got some serious pop to his game. He's got some heavy hands. He's not the longest, like tallest guy, but there's some real juice there. I'm pretty impressed with what I saw from Williams, and like that's a guy going for it. I think Auburn. Do I want to judge based off one game? I'm probably biased because I work for 24/7 Sports, but I liked what I saw there. Like that's that. You're always kind of debating, okay, who's going to be in the back end of the 5 stars? He slipped in there at number 30 for us, and after 1 week, I'm pretty happy with that one.
Tom, you got that stat?
Yeah, it's because I went back. There was another game I watched, and something stood out to me. So I went and I looked at the numbers, and I've got a little trivia for you here, boys.
Yes.
There were 55 quarterbacks this weekend who threw at least 10 passes of 10 air yards or more. 5 of them completed at least 80% of those passes. I will name the first 4. Miller Moss was 10 of 11. North Texas's Chandler Morris was 14 of 15. Hudson Card was 9 of 10. Again, that's 2 Cover 3 guests on that list. And then Jackson Dart was 10 of 12. Do you know who the 5th was?
Was it your guy?
Luke Altmaier?
No.
No. I'm talking about your other guy. Nico?
Nico was 7 of 10. So 70%. Cade McNamara.
Whoa!
Oh,
On passes of 10 air yards or more for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns. Because as I was watching the game, and like the first half was not pretty. The second half, things started like clicking, and I'm sitting there watching. I was like, they're pushing the ball down the damn field. They're throwing vertically, and he's hitting these throws. And they weren't all amazing throws. Some of them were a little behind. Some of them were a little, but he was putting it on target to Iowa receivers, which was blowing my mind because I can't remember the last time I was watching an Iowa quarterback pushing the ball downfield and making accurate throws to receivers, not tight ends, although the tight ends were involved, but to receivers. Iowa is an offensive juggernaut. You heard it here first. They're scoring 30 points a game.
Tom, can I put 2 guys on your radar for Whoopsie Daisy?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're both G5, but I feel like we need to have a watch list for the Whoopsie Daisy King. Number 1 is Gio Lopez from South Alabama, who had an awesome day in a crazy shootout loss to North Texas. I believe he combined for 5 turnover-worthy throws and also 5 big-time throws. So we are sending it with Gio Lopez. Also, he's a really good runner. But the number 1 guy to watch out for here is Tyler Huff of Jacksonville State, who threw 4 turnover-worthy passes in 17 dropbacks. So that is not necessarily like that might be a ratio where you're so bad you get benched. Because I don't know if that's sustainable. But if they keep playing him, that's a guy to watch.
Would you like to know Tyler Huff's current whoopsie daisy rate?
Yes, I would actually.
17.86%.
And isn't he first?
Oh my God. The next closest is 8.33%.
Yeah, I saw the bar
He's
chart.
got more than double of Grant Wilson from Old Dominion.
So he's on the radar. Okay.
Yeah. You know who's 6th right now? Evan Swoboda from Wyoming.
Oh God. Yeah, that was bad.
Bad intel.
Where's Connor Wegman?
Connor Wegman. Let me check.
Yeah, hey Danny, let's can we have a little Texas A&M
47th.
So I don't know if you guys remember, there was an Auburn quarterback, Jeremy Johnson. You guys remember that name?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He had played like 1 or 2 games prior to becoming the starter. I went there. We were doing a bus tour. Got to talk to Gus. I think Rhett Lashley might have been the coordinator at the time. And the game that he came in was awesome. Like, he looked spectacular. And I was all in on Jeremy Johnson. Like, preseason Heisman, I was like, this dude's going to be awesome. I don't know if it's going to be that bad because, like, he never played. Like, he was benched pretty quick. But I feel like Connor Wegman is entering that territory where you hear all these great things about him, and everybody kind of buys, kind of takes the cheese, so to speak. And I remember who it was on here who said, like, well, what game has he played great in? And there was an Ole Miss game. He threw 4 touchdowns, but that was not a very confidence-inspiring game for Wigman, like, obviously. And I just wonder if some of it's kind of, and I've talked myself into it, so I'm putting myself right out there because I thought he would be good. I thought he'd be better. I thought Colin Klein would utilize his run skills. I didn't know it'd be that hard for him to throw the football. Like, I mean, there were some throws there that should have been made that were concerning for sure. And they're going to have to do some soul searching. I know that Mike Elko clip of him saying run the ball is like on, that's going viral about him. They're going to try to be more physical, but the stat line wasn't great. It didn't look good. They are in, and that was a trendy pick for mine. I think I had them making the playoffs, going 10-2, but I had them winning that game, and I was wrong on that one. I kind of wonder if they're all of a sudden in jeopardy of going under the win total as well. And like, that was concerning.
I think they are definitely in jeopardy of going under the win total.
For sure.
I understand Notre Dame has a defense that some of the other national title contenders would sign up for tomorrow. Like, if we could add this defense to what we've got offensively, we'd be in tremendous shape. But I didn't think that Texas A&M's offensive line was getting a lot of push. Mike Elko wants them to run the ball, but even when they were running the ball, it seemed like that first hit was coming at or behind the line of scrimmage, and it was just on Texas A&M's ball carriers to muscle their way for anything. And like you mentioned, it just looked difficult with Connor Wegman. There are going to be other teams on Texas A&M's schedule in some of these coin flip games in the SEC where if you're not intimidating offensively, it's going to be really, really hard to try to overcome a deficit or salt away the clock or like come up with those drives and those plays that you need to do to win those games. I'm readjusting my Texas A&M expectations big time because I don't think that's fixable in a week or two.
So I agree with you on that. I will note that if you want some positivity for A&M fans, they didn't look great, but there are several opponents who looked way worse relative to expectations than they did, right? They have to go to the Swamp. Is Florida going to quit on Billy Napier by then? I don't know. They quit in that second half. Like that's a capital Q quit. If you look at the effort they displayed there in that second half, can they bounce back? Do they care? I don't know. Right? South Carolina looked like a disaster. So, those are 2 road games they have to play in the SEC. So yes, it's disappointing to lose a coin flip game, but those 2 road games are more gettable to me than they were even after watching all of those teams play. At Mississippi State, we don't know. I'd much rather play Mississippi State late than early, given what they have as far as depth-wise. At Auburn, probably it's a little tougher because they did look buttoned up, but, who knows? That's the week before the Iron Bowl. So
the biggest break they catch is they don't have to play Vandy.
This is true. They don't play a lot of the better SEC defenses.
Like Notre Dame's defense might be one of the toughest defenses they face in the regular season.
Like there's no Georgia, there's no Bama, there's no Tennessee, right? Like you get Missouri, LSU, Auburn. You do have to play Texas, which may or may not be really good on defense. We'll see. Like Arkansas, Florida.
And that's why I liked them. A lot of it was the schedule, but it just feels a little bit tougher now with what you saw at Wegman. And it was just, there were throws to be made that he just simply didn't make for whatever reason.
I got 2 boots on the ground reports from, several, but 2 that stand out to me and that I put some weight in. One's from the Miami side, one's from the Florida side. The Miami side says, we left 20 points on the board. The beatdown should have been worse. That's about what you expect. The Florida side, The worst in-person experience since the 2014 homecoming loss, 42-13 to Missouri with 6 turnovers. The Fire Billy Napier and F Billy Napier chants were astoundingly loud and widespread throughout the crowd.
How about the scene with recruits coming off the field after the game when the poor girls trying to corral them and keep them away?
And
Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
Well,
Right
they
by
put
the
the
tunnel where
recruits-
Miami was going to the
They put the
locker. Yeah.
recruits right next to Miami's tunnel
Yeah.
and where Miami's fans were.
That's just good game planning.
That's great game plan. Great game planning.
I had a lot of Miami fans push back on the bet that
Whoa. Clip that. Bud said a lot of Miami fans.
at least on the internet. Although they did show up pretty well in Gainesville. Like that, there was maybe they just stood out because those colors pop and like they were loud and had something to cheer about. But I had a lot of Miami fans be like, bro, why are you assuming Lagway is going to go to A&M? Like we think he's going to go to Miami. So that'll be interesting.
When do you think Napier pulls that, breaks the glass on him?
I mean, is Mertz
Right. I mean, that's why
Mertz in protocol? Like
Yeah.
was that concussion? His press conference is. I mean, I'm going to go to Swamp 24/7 and just because Rudner and Hall and those guys do such a good job recapping it. But
I
think it's
concussion or
12.
not, I was not
Right.
very impressed with anything I saw from Grant Mertz in that game.
they have
that
an
was
FCS
probably the
game
most
this week,
surprising
right?
aspect of the game because I thought Mertz would at least manage the game a little bit better, and he struggled all day. Credit to Miami's defense for that. One thing I'll say about Cam Ward, I think he's all that. I think it's one of the reasons I like Miami this year. He's got to be a little bit careful because he likes to go big game hunting. And so does Patrick Mahomes. So does, there's a lot of Shador likes to do it in Colorado. He likes waiting for the big play, and it got him in trouble early. And I do think that's the adjustment. The NFL made it to Mahomes, and he adjusts fine. But like similar to what we were talking about LSU, like just don't give up the big one. Don't give up the big one. Keep everybody in front of you and try to see if they can, if you can force them into that mistake, because he did. He made that mistake early. And I mean, trust me, I am not, this is just really nitpicking about if you're trying to stop him and what teams I think the adjustment they would make. He's got that tendency, which a lot of the Caleb Williams did it at USC. Like it's a tendency now with some quarterbacks to try to get that big play. And sometimes they leave those easier ones on the field.
There will be
Quarterback.
some teams that have a real pass rush from like that don't have to just completely manufacture it or just play drop 8. Because Florida had no 4-down pass rush at all. Everything had to be games because their ends are just not good players, right? I think the 2D tackles are nice. So we'll see how they react to that. But I don't know how many more teams that Miami plays really have that. So like I think they're pretty set, at least until the playoff.
Yeah, to Danny's point on Cam, there was the one play, and I discussed it on Saturday night. I'm pretty sure it was a 3rd down where he was rolling out to his right, and he had a guy wide open underneath for the 1st down, and he was just sitting there staring, waiting to see if the guy that was running the clear out could get open. And then he finally checked down. I'm like, bro, the 1st down's right there. Just throw it.
Danny had to run for CBS Sports HQ. Didn't get a chance to ask him, but I did need to make sure that this Cover 3 podcast does not end with a little vibe check. But week 1 concludes tonight in Tallahassee. I need to know the vibes. What are we thinking with Boston College come to town, Florida State? What do you think we will see? Like, I mean, of course, give a prediction, a lock, like take that whatever you want, but just what will be different? How do you think it's going to look tonight for Florida State?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't. Like we'll see how this plays out. I'm curious. I mean, there's a couple reasons for that. We don't really know what BC is, right? Like, what are they going to run? How much of the QB run game stuff? I would assume if you watched the Georgia Tech game, you would.
I was going to say, what are they going to run? Thomas Castellanos.
I think so too. Yeah,
probably called maybe 7 times and then not called about like 5 or 6 more.
That kind of, I mean, Bill O'Brien offenses have never really been QB run heavy.
No, and Bill
that's
O'Brien's,
why I'm asking.
Yeah.
And they went and got Grayson James, who is a statue from FIU, to like as a transfer. So we don't really know what they're going to look like. Defensively, again, pretty confident that Horsley and Ezeraku are good players on the D line. Everybody else, we will see. I thought Florida State was much closer to being good in the run game than they were the pass game. Like that, they did have when we did the rewatch, they were a lot closer to popping some of these runs than they were to popping passes. So my guess here is that since BC's probably not going tempo, Bill O'Brien's not a huge tempo guy, you probably cut down the rotations a little bit and lean more on Williams, Toafili, Cam Davis, maybe Lucas. Those are 4 backs. And I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Like, I'm curious about the best teams are player-led teams. Like, how is the leadership on this team, right? A lot of us got it wrong in week 1. Saban's like, it's a top 5 looking like eyeball test roster. So, and I thought it was a little crazy that Thamel was saying they had the best D-line in the country, but I do think it has potential to be a really good D-line still. But like, how are they as leaders, right? Are your best players also guys that are good teammates? We'll see.
My Twitter tip for the game is the under, but I'm also going to sprinkle a little bit on like some Florida State alt line because they missed so many tackles in that Georgia Tech game.
Yeah.
And, it's like the first game of the year. Just you see, like when you watch the NFL week 1 next week, watch how many missed tackles there are because nobody's hitting in practice anymore. But like, if they improve on that in this game, I feel like being at home, if they tackle better, this could end up being a blowout. So I am going to put a little bit on some Seminole all lines.
Oh, I do have something, by the way.
Ants.
Got a new addition to the shelf right here.
Oh, all right.
They're good, actually. Like, to bounce back and play that well against a Georgia State team that I thought might be kind of terrible, but they weren't. Like, Georgia State actually looked pretty competent, and Tech still comes off an international trip, short rest, obvious letdown spot. They come out, handle business, and cover. Like, State didn't just gift them that game and have a million turnovers. Like,
no, that was I don't know specifically if it was red zone roulette, but Panthers could move the ball and then couldn't punch it in.
Tech might be pretty good. So that's the other thing. If you wanted to do the alts, the 22 FSU team killed that Boston College team. And then last year they were up 31-10, had like a fumble 6 and then fumbled a kickoff and so I don't know.
But Thomas Castellanos also ran for 90 yards.
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll be very interesting to break down how that goes. All right, so Tuesday we will be back on CBS Sports Network, getting you set for the Big Ten week ahead. You can also find that after the fact.
Danny wants a lock.
Yeah, no, sorry. Danny's texting right now if it's too late to add locks because he would like to put Florida State minus 16.5. Yes, it's too late, Daniel. Go do TV.
Yeah.
He's sitting there waiting for them to come back for commercial. Like, hey, can I add Florida State minus 16.5?
Danny had a good locks week, right?
I know. He's playing with house money. He's the only one of us who had a winning week.
Yeah. 5-6, 4-5, 3-6, and then 7-4 for Danny Cannell.
He's the sharp here. Let's be honest. It's about time we all admit it.
And then after winning Georgia Tech plus 350, I have blown all of the cash. Jackson State didn't sniff it. Wyoming.
We only had one upset. Only one double-digit dog lost, or only one double-digit favorite the entire weekend lost.
Chalky ass week.
Pretty sure.
Oh, all right. Hold on. Who was it?
Who do you think it was?
The biggest
Diego. Yeah.
Bro. Oh yeah, Vanderbilt. Yeah.
I mean, I think right.
That's the only one
nobody else. No FCS wins.
Correct.
The top 10 teams or top 9 teams only allowed 5 combined touchdowns.
I saw that note.
Piss and Pavia.
Oh well. Wait, was Rice double digits at kick? I think Rice closed 8, so that to me that's not double digits.
Well, the thing that stood out to me was the whole city of Houston getting dunked on by 20 points. Houston loses at home to UNLV by 20 points. Rice loses at home by 20 points.
Arkansas State should have lost. That calls. Like, I don't think you can fix a game. Like nobody's getting enough money down to like make it worth it to try to fix an FCS game. But like that's one of the worst calls I've ever seen.
It's a literal buy game, is what you're saying.
Oh, man. All right. So we are going to be back on Tuesday, CBS Sports Network, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Watch us live. You can get the show on demand on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be looking to the week ahead in the Big Ten. Remember, we give you even more big game breakdowns this season because we're going to do some of it on the CBS Sports Network show on Tuesdays and then even more when we circle back together on Wednesdays for Big Game Breakdown, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Come hang out for that. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See y'all.